the guilt that we feel every single day with our pets. So guilt that we're gone from home too long, or guilt that we're not providing the type of stimulation or the type of attention, or we're too tired when we come home from work. In our society, there is a group of people that will understand if you're in a work setting and you say, well, I've been here for 10 hours, I need to go home because I need to let my dog out. Most people will understand that. If you say I've been here 10 hours and my cat has been all by itself, far fewer people understand that.
Bentornati! Welcome back to Felinésse. I'm your host, Melissa Mezzalira, founder of CatsEssentials. Today we're talking about something close to the heart of every cat parent. Loving a cat is powerful. There is something about their presence that helps us slow down, breathe deeper, and feel a little more grounded. And what's fascinating in that is that science is beginning to support what cat parents have known all along. That this connection isn't just emotional, it has measurable psychological and physiological effects. But the deeper the bond, the heavier the responsibility can feel. So today we're exploring both sides of the human-cat connection, the real mental and physical impact they have on us, and the invisible guilt many cat parents quietly carry. To help us understand both the science and the psychology behind this bond, I'm joined by Dr. Lori Kogan. Dr. Kogan is a professor of clinical sciences at Colorado State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. She serves as chair of the Human-Animal Interaction section of the American Psychological Association, and she is the editor-in-chief of the Human-Animal Interaction Journal. Her work focuses on the psychological dimensions of the human-animal bond, particularly at the intersection of mental health and veterinary medicine. Dr. Kogan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa.
You're welcome. I'm so happy you're here. So to start, I think many cat parents recognize the positive effect our cats have on our everyday lives. I know for me, I feel it immediately when Maya comes on my lap and starts kneading on me, or when my baby boy lays on my chest and he starts purring. There is an instant shift. It feels more like relaxation. There is obviously unconditional love. Maybe the worries of the day soften a little bit. And sometimes it's even just their quiet physical presence next to me that make a difference. So, and I know I'm not imagining that, and I'm not the only cat parent feeling this way. And science suggests that we're not imagining it either. So, Dr. Kogan, from a scientific perspective, what's happening physiologically and psychologically in those moments?
Well, I think you're right. I don't think that you're imagining it. And I think that many cat parents do talk about the both physiological and psychological benefits. So that ability to be in the present moment, that ability to slow down. There's studies looking at how we tend to synchronize our breathing with animals around us. And I agree with you that sometimes that breathing, that purring, it helps put us in a different state. And lots of times our animals demand a lot of attention from us, which helps us divert some of that worry, some of that rumination that we might be doing about other topics. And so there've been many studies now that show the benefits. When our breathing changes, our heart rate changes, our arousal rate goes down. And it's for many people, I think it's a different type of almost meditation. So it's putting us in this state that we're just better able to handle some of the things that go on in our lives. I agree with you. So there's nothing like a pet, being on your chest or in your lap that helps divert some of that anxiety, some of that potential negative feelings into loving feelings. And it shows up in things like, your oxytocin levels and things like that.
Right. So it will be great if maybe doctors should start prescribing spending time with cats.
Right. And they have done that with dogs with heart issues, right? Saying that it improves the physiological aspects. So So we're only one step away from cats.
Right. I feel that when this kind of bond that we have with our pets is that deep, I think that's why it makes sense that it matters so much to us. And when something matters that much, maybe we can start to feel the weight of the responsibility of this. And
Mhm.
sometimes that weight shows up as guilt. I know for me, it is especially when I travel or when one of my cats is not feeling their best. So, in your research, you talked about something called disenfranchised guilt in cat parents. Can you please explain what that means?
Sure. Disenfranchised guilt is a term that I coined to mean that the guilt that many pet parents have about their pets that is unrecognized. And so then when it's unrecognized, then we can't really support people. We can't, it's not validated. It's not seen as important. And what I mean by that is, there have been a lot of studies that talk about guilt related to end of life issues and making decisions about end of life. But the work that I did really looked at just the guilt that we feel every single day with our pets. So guilt that we're gone from home too long, or guilt that, we're not providing the type of stimulation or the type of attention, or we're too tired when we come home from work, or like you alluded to, Melissa, when we want to go out, whether it be in the evenings or on vacations, and we don't want to leave our pet alone. And so then we feel guilty, especially if we've been gone all day long. And the work that I did, I looked at both dog owners and cat owners. And dog owners tended to report a little bit more guilt than cat owners for several things. But I felt like the impact of guilt is probably more significant overall for cat owners, because in our society, there is a group of people that will understand if you're in a work setting and you say, well, I've been here for 10 hours, I need to go home because I need to let my dog out. Most people will understand that. If you say I've been here 10 hours and my cat has been all by itself, far fewer people understand that. And so that's what I mean by it's even more disenfranchised for cat owners that struggle with this guilt and oftentimes don't feel like that people at work or their friends understand, when they say to their friends, no, I can't go out this weekend because I haven't spent any time this week with my cat. I think that a lot of people struggle to understand that.
Yeah, I think unfortunately there is still a lot of misunderstanding or actually misconception about cats. Thinking that they're independent and they don't need us. They can go on, without our presence, but it's not true. They are attached to us, and not just that. It's also the way we feel about them. I know, every time, either if I travel or if I'm out, I always have the two emotions. I have one side of me is excited to go for the upcoming travel or, whatever I'm doing. But at the same time, I have this kind of like a quiet stress, about leaving my cats, even if I know they're safe or they're well cared for. It's kind of that like a double feeling that many cat parents understand.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
why do you think that time away guilt is so psychologically powerful?
Well, I think it's because, as you alluded to, cat owners know that their cats are attached to them and their cats miss them, and so they feel bad. And so they want to spend more time with them. They want to be with them. So I think, as we talk about these things more and more and people recognize that these are prevalent feelings, my hope is that we start to kind of shift our perceptions and we give people more latitude, if they need to go home over lunch or they need to take some work home with them rather than, spend those extra hours at work. I mean, I'd like to see both dogs and cats more included in our society. It's always interesting to me how we talk a lot about people's children and we include them in many different things, and say different types of health assessments. So, for example, I'm doing some work right now looking at cancer survivors and the benefits and the challenges of having pets while you're going through recovery and treatment. And of course, when you go in to oncology appointments, they ask you if you have children, because they're looking at what does your family unit look like? What are your stresses? What are your responsibilities? Who's your support system? Very rarely are they asking whether the oncology patient has pets. Um,
Hmm.
Yet we know that, and my research would certainly support this, that there are a lot of challenges that come with having pets going through cancer treatment and recovery. There's a million benefits, having, I mean, some of those things we talked about at the very beginning about being a companion, about being there, about helping alleviate worry, being in the present moment. Um, and our cats could care less what we look like or if we shower that day or if our hair looks good. They're there for us anyway, right? And so there's all these benefits, but there are challenges. And I think that we really are dropping the ball on providing support for cancer survivors and helping them take care of their pets. And that's what part of my research is aimed at is creating support systems, encouraging oncology professionals to ask people about their pets. And because, for example, after you're recovering from surgery, you can't really lift up a bag of kitty litter. You can't lift up a bag of cat food. Um, you need to be super, super careful about cleaning out the litter box. And it's, we need to talk more about those things. And because unfortunately, some oncology professionals, their go-to is, oh my gosh, you've got a pet, you need to get rid of them. Well, what? We don't talk about getting rid of your children.
No, that is
And we
not the
know it's the
solution,
same thing,
right?
right? And so
Yeah.
it's helping people keep those relationships that are most important to them.
Right. But do you think, because I'm starting to see a shift on how, in general, people is now is considering pets as part of the family,
Mhm.
like family members. I think society is going towards that direction. Do you think that eventually will come to situations like this too, where they're actually, taken into account when some major, life changes or things are happening in the family?
I mean, I think we are heading in the right direction, but I can say I just did training with oncology professionals a couple of weeks ago, and the majority of them were not asking about people's pets, even though almost all of them had pets. And so,
Mm,
as soon as we brought it up, they're like, oh my gosh, of course I should be asking. But until you're made aware, and we have these systems that have just been passed down, until we start
mm,
saying, wait a minute. I mean, it's like natural disasters. We weren't paying any attention to the fact that most families had pets until things like Katrina happened. And then we're
right.
like, oh my gosh, we're really dropping the ball here. We need to make plans for all of the family members.
Right. Well, thank you for doing that work. So it's so
Mhm.
important, to bring awareness to these important topics because, yeah, they are definitely family members. So when we put our resources together for the family, we always, we always include them. So yeah, that is wonderful that what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I also think when it comes to guilt, another big part of it can show up around their health and wellness.
Mhm.
I think as cat parents, we want to make the right decisions. We want to advocate for them. Sometimes, that means researching, asking more questions to our vet, or even getting a second opinion because we feel that big responsibility. We feel like very deeply about them. So, why do you think that medical decisions carry so much emotional weight for cat parents?
Well, I think it's because cats can't talk directly, right? We're always guessing. And cats are notorious for hiding things like pain and discomfort. And I've done a couple studies looking at pet owners' perceptions of things that could be pain. And what I found was that because I think almost all owners want to do the right thing. They just need sometimes a little bit more education. And so the study that I did looking at pain looked at three different kind of ambiguous scenarios, like for example, a cat that was always really friendly and liked to be petted, and now all of a sudden doesn't really like that anymore.
Mhm.
And and initially asked people what their concern level was and how likely they would be to take their cat to the vet. And then provided just a little bit, just a couple sentences of explanation that these could be symptoms of pain. And I think it's something that pet owners don't normally think about for some of these ambiguous things. So things like personality changes or behavior changes where they say, well, like Fluffy's just kind of getting lazy in his old age, or, well, no, probably not, or, Fluffy's not eating as well, but he's just probably finicky, or probably not, right? I mean, he probably has some type of mouth pain or some type of tooth pain and so as soon as we educate people that this could be pain, then their concern level goes up and their likelihood of going to the vet increases. And so to me, what that means is that we need to be doing a better job of educating cat owners that when these ambiguous changes are happening, think about whether it could be pain or not, and bring that up to veterinarian. And there's a couple really neat pain assessment tools out there now. There's the one that I used for the study is just a paper one from Colorado State University. And I liked it because it has pictures of a cat in different kind of postures and settings to kind of help you evaluate a little bit. And using that as a tool to maybe then talk to your veterinarian about my cat's looking a little bit more like this rather than totally comfortable. But there's even some really neat new tools that are coming out using AI to be able to take photographs of your pet and then have AI kind of match it with all of these small markers to help identify pain that perhaps we're not even able to see yet. So there's some really cutting edge stuff that's very exciting for cat pain, which I think so many cat owners would really appreciate because, again, it's tough to tell in cats lots of times.
Yeah, it's true. I totally agree with you on that. They have really good hiding skills. So,
Mhm.
but thank you for sharing those resources. We will have those on the link above on our episode. And I think following on what you said, I also believe that the more we are educated, the more we understand our cats and we are able to read their behavior, their needs, or even their stress signals, I think the more confident and more calmer we can be as caregivers. Do you think that education reduces this guilt and increases our caregiving confidence?
I'm not sure that education will reduce our guilt. I do think it can increase our confidence. And it can lead to making better decisions as a cat parent for sure. I mean, other examples come to mind is that, taking a cat to veterinarian is often like a really stressful event for everybody.
Yeah.
And they have medication now to help with that. So I encourage people that if your cat, stresses out going to the vet, ask your veterinarian for some medication to give at home to make that experience more pleasant for both of you. I talk to cat parents all the time that they oftentimes procrastinate going to the vet because it's so stressful for their cat. So anything that we can do to help mitigate some of that stress, and then it improves our cat welfare and our cat health.
Yeah, it is definitely stressful for the cat, but also for the cat parent because we see that they're uncomfortable. And so we
Mhm.
have to try to do our best to, to keep them calm. Like you said, maybe now I also use gabapentin for my cats before going to the vet because it helps them
Exactly.
stay calm. And then there are, carriers that have some calming solutions. So there are a lot of things that we can do. But again, it goes back to, us as cat parent advocating for our cats. So we have to
Mhm.
first, be willing to learn and research. And then we have to be the one asking the questions because sometimes your vet might not tell you if you don't explain, hey, my cat gets really stressful. They probably see it when it's there, but it's too late. So I think we have to be proactive
Mhm.
on, educating ourselves of what we need to do to help our cats best. And so I think another when we talk about these health concerns and that I think it is very stressful because myself too, then you always have the doubt, am I doing enough? Do we need to do another test? And It's just so much. And I think another layer of that is also when financial limitations enter the
Mhm.
picture.
Mhm.
Because, sometimes we might not be able to say yes to every recommendation that the veterinarian give us about treatments or whatever we need to do for our cats.
Mhm.
How can cat parents cope with that guilt of not being able to do everything?
Well, Melissa, that's a really big deal. And I think most pet parents feel like that. I mean, the cost of veterinary care has far exceeded inflation over the last several years. And it is a growing concern of mine that veterinary care is becoming increasingly out of reach for
Mhm.
a large segment of our population. Given your specific question, I think that it's always a balance of what works with people's individual financial situation and their life. And, my hope is that nobody passes judgment on anybody else. We all have all of these other responsibilities and all these other things that are drawing our money.
Mhm.
And we all have to make those tough decisions. So when we're looking at testing or, diagnoses, one of the things I always think about is what would I do with this information? Is this going to help me make decisions that then I would have the financial capability to make? So, for example, if I'm testing for something and if the answer comes back positive and the treatment is $10,000, well, it doesn't really matter whether my cat has that problem or not because I can't afford that treatment. And so kind of thinking through with your veterinarian about the kind of so what, so if we do these diagnoses, then what? And and it's always a matter of just trying to weigh things and ultimately making decisions that we try to positively impact the welfare of our cat. And that might just be that we give them a pain-free life for as long as possible.
Right, right. Yeah, because there are also, other things that we can do, for example, insurance. And that is another very difficult topic because it's not always clear and is becoming more and more difficult to actually get a good insurance that covers especially the important things. Again, like you said, the
Yeah.
pricing is going up, so there is a lot of stressful decision that we need to make. Do you think that somehow the veterinary teams can help us reducing that emotional burden?
Sure. I think it's really important to pick out the right veterinarian. I wanted to circle back for a second and say, that it might be worthwhile checking and seeing if your veterinarian is certified in things like fear-free practices. There's some specific like feline fear-free certifications, so you might want to think about asking your veterinarian if they have those, or they can get those on a clinic level.
Right.
It's not as popular, but those are things to consider. The insurance thing, I mean, you're right, Melissa, that's another like huge can of worms. I mean, we have very low insurance rate in this country compared to some other countries. If you're shopping for insurance, it's really important that you look at trying to compare apples to apples. There are some insurance companies out there that are much less expensive than some others, but they have a tendency then to maybe drop you if something significant comes up. So making sure that you have an insurance policy that's going to be there when you need it is really, really important. And I've done some work looking at just the peace of mind that comes with insurance. I've heard the argument that insurance is not a good financial investment, and I would argue that many times you're absolutely right. That unless something catastrophic comes up, you're probably right. Like if you were to stick that money in a savings account, um, you would probably do better money wise. But I don't think that's what insurance is for. I mean, we don't look at fire insurance on our house as a good financial investment. We look at
Mhm.
it like it's a peace of mind investment. And I think that to me is what pet insurance is about. So choosing a good company that's going to be with you, but then that peace of mind that then if you do those diagnoses that we were talking about a little while ago and you end up with your $10,000 projection for cost for treatment, you're like, oh, okay, I have insurance. I think that's the gift of insurance.
Right. And I think, though, another important switch that we need to do as a society is to think more about preventative healthcare.
Mhm.
Because the insurance might be there because when you find out, unfortunately, there is an issue, there is a disease or something. But I think I am much more on preventative care, and I've noticed that all the things I'm trying to do for my cats as a prevention, before anything bad shows up, they're not covered by any insurance. So, you
Right.
know
We have the
that
same problem with human healthcare.
yeah, exactly. But I think that's, another societal shift that should be, taken in consideration.
Quite myopic, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so when it comes to guilt, I think another big important guilt that as cat parents we have to face sometimes is unfortunately like end of life decisions. But that is a topic that is very complex and deeply emotional, and I think we will dedicate a separate conversation to that,
Mhm.
if you're open to that. And but I think when it comes to guilt, perhaps some degree of guilt is probably normal. Do you think that there is a point when that guilt becomes harmful?
I do. I mean, I think it depends on what we do with that guilt. So, for example, if that guilt then leads to depression and anxiety, then I think it's harmful. If it leads to behaviors that isolate people, so when we talked about not wanting to go out in the evenings or on the weekends or things like that, when that's our compensatory behaviors, I think it can be harmful. I mean, you're right. I think that guilt is absolutely normal and most people have it. It's just at what level and then how we're dealing with it.
And so, how do you think that cat parents can shift from that guilt based caregiving to a more, let's say, informed or compassionate, or, how do we not feel too guilty to the point, like you said, that it becomes harmful?
I mean, I think a couple things. One is actually spending some quality time with with your cat when you're home. So I don't think that they need us to be home all the time, but they do want attention, right? And so putting things down or, stepping away from your computer for 10 minutes and just really focusing on your cat. And then those types of things I think can help you feel better when you think, okay, I know I'm going to be gone for a while, and carefully vetting the people that you have care for your pet when you're leaving. And some people like to have like little video cameras around their house to help them feel better knowing that their cats are fine while they're gone. So buying little toys, things like that, and really enriching their lives in other ways, I think can go a long way towards alleviating some of that guilt.
Right. Yeah, I do have pet cameras everywhere, so I can see them at any time. It is hard, It is hard because for some reason, there is always the worry, not just okay, they're gonna miss us, but what if something happens and I'm not there?
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
but anyway. Okay, so before we wrap up, for listeners who want to learn more about the human animal interaction, where can they find more resources?
Sure, I would encourage everybody to join the HAI section, Human Animal Interactions section of American Psychological Association. It's free to join and anybody can join. You don't have to be a psychologist, and we've got folks from around the world. So we've got a lot of ongoing webinars. We've got our archived webinars. We have our own podcast series. So I encourage you to check it out.
Okay, great. We will share that link on the notes as well. And so, in closing, I would like to close like this. I believe that loving cats is deeply meaningful. And yes, it does come with responsibility. But I think that with understanding, education, and support, like you mentioned, that responsibility can soften a little bit into a more confident caregiving.
Mhm.
And I think if we feel some guilt, it doesn't mean that we are failing. It just means that we care so much. And I think that is something that we have to be proud of. So, Dr. Kogan, I would like to thank you so much for sharing your research and your perspective with us, and for the important work that you continue to do in strengthening the human-animal bond. And for everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. We'll continue this conversation in upcoming episodes, and I will see you in the next episode. A presto! Ciao! Thank you for being here and for caring deeply about your cats. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to follow Felinésse so we can continue learning together. And if you would like to support your cat's comfort and long-term wellness, you're welcome to explore what we're creating at CatsEssentials.com. I will see you in the next episode. A presto!